Now, right now, a lot of the regulatory debate centers on Section 230 of the United States Code, which, as some of you know, says that tech companies generally can't be held liable for most content that other people post on their platforms. But let's face it, these platforms are not like the old phone company. And while I'm not convinced that wholesale repeal of Section 230 is the answer, it is clear that tech companies have changed dramatically over the last 20 years. And we need to consider reforms to Section 230 to account for those changes, including whether platforms should be required to have a higher standard of care when it comes to advertising on their site. And by the way, I believe, and I've seen, that regulation and innovation are not mutually exclusive. Now, here in the United States, we have a long history of regulating new technologies in the name of public safety, from cars and airplanes to prescription drugs to appliances. And while companies initially always complain that the rules are going to stifle innovation and destroy the industry, the truth is that a good regulatory environment usually ends up spurring innovation because it raises the bar on safety and quality, and it turns out that innovation can meet that higher bar. And if consumers trust that new technology is doing right by them and is safe, they're more likely to use it. And if properly structured, regulation can promote competition and keep incumbents from freezing out new innovators. So a regulatory structure, a smart one, needs to be in place, designed in consultation with tech companies and experts and communities that are affected, including communities of color and others that sometimes are not well represented here in Silicon Valley, that will allow these companies to operate effectively while also slowing the spread of harmful content. In some cases, industry standards may replace or substitute for regulation, but regulation has to be part of the answer. Beyond that, tech companies need to be more transparent about how they operate. Now, so much of the conversation around disinformation is focused on what people post. The bigger issue is what content these platforms promote. Algorithms have evolved to the point where nobody on the outside of these companies can accurately predict what they'll do, unless they're really sophisticated and spend a lot of time tracking it, and sometimes even the people who build them aren't sure. And that's a problem. In a democracy, we can rightly expect companies to subject the design of their products and services to some level of scrutiny. At minimum, they should have to share that information with researchers and regulators who are charged with keeping the rest of us safe. This may seem like an odd example, and forgive me, you vegans out there, but if a meat-packing company has a proprietary technique to keep, say, our hot dogs fresh and clean, they don't have to reveal to the world what that technique is. They do have to tell the meat inspector. In the same way, tech companies should be able to protect their intellectual property while also following certain safety standards that we as a country, not just them, have agreed are necessary for the greater good. And we've seen this as part of the Platform Accountability and Transparency Act that's being proposed by a bipartisan group of senators here in the United States. Doesn't happen often. And we've also seen it negotiated in Europe as part of the European Union's Digital Services Act. Again, we don't expect tech companies to solve all these problems on their own. There are folks in these companies and in this community who have shown extraordinary good faith in some cases, but that's not enough. We we do expect these companies to affirm the importance of our democratic institutions, not dismiss them, and to work to find the right combination of regulation and industry standards that will make democracies stronger. And because companies recognize the often dangerous relationship between social media, nationalism, domestic hate groups, they do need to engage with vulnerable populations about how to put better safeguards in place to protect minority populations, ethnic populations, religious minorities, wherever they operate. So, for example, in the United States, they should be working with, not always contrary to, those groups that are trying to prevent voter suppression, that specifically has targeted black and brown communities. In other words, these companies need to have some other North Star other than just making money and increasing market share. Fix the problem that, in part, they helped create, but also to stand for something bigger. And to the employees of these companies and to the students here at Stanford who might well be future employees of these companies, you have the power to move things in the right direction. You can advocate for change, you can be part of this redesign, and if not, you can vote with your feet and go work with companies that are trying to do the right thing. So that's on the supply side. Now, let's talk about the demand side of the equation. It starts with breaking through our information bubbles. Look, I understand that there are a whole bunch of people in this country who have views diametrically opposed to mine. I promise. They tell me all the time. I get it. I'm not suggesting that all of us have to spend our days reading opinions we disagree with or looking for media stories that fundamentally don't share our values. But it is possible to broaden our perspectives. An interesting study came out recently, and this is just one study, so take it with a grain of salt. The researchers paid a large group of regular Fox News watchers to watch CNN for almost a month. And these were not swing voters. These were hardcore, Hannity, Carlson fans, right? I mean, they're right there. And what the researchers found was that at the end of the month, people's views on certain issues, like whether voting by mail should be allowed or whether electing Joe Biden would lead to more violence against police. On some of these issues, their views had changed by 5, 8, 10 points. These people didn't suddenly turn into liberals. I'm sure they still don't like me. But at the margins, they had reshaped their perspectives in meaningful ways. Studies like this show our opinions aren't fixed.